Very good. So our next speaker on behalf of the U.S. Navy is the Deputy CNO, Rear Admiral Stuart Munsch.
Thanks. Well, good morning, everyone. Terrific to be here with you. Obviously, the focus of our discussion is the Arctic. I am a submariner, and we'll speak to that to some degree. But my other association here is I am from North Dakota. So I'd like to thank the U.S. Arctic Research Commission and the U.S. National Ice Center for inviting me here today. And I'd like to acknowledge the other dignitaries that will be speaking here today. The Honorable Angus King, Senator from Maine, the Honorable Lisa Murkowski, and Honorable Dan Sullivan, Senators from Alaska. And of course, preceding me here was Admiral Paul Zukov, Commandant of the Coast Guard, who also took most of the press with him on departure. And other dignitaries and distinguished members of the audience. Admiral John Richardson, our Chief of Naval Operations, has articulated his vision for the future of the Navy. And he calls his idea a design for maintaining maritime superiority. In the design, he reminds us the United States Navy's mission is to be ready to conduct prompt and sustained combat, incident to operations at sea, and that we will protect America from attack and preserve America's strategic influence in key regions of the world. The design recognizes our world has become dramatically more globalized, and that trend is accelerating. In accounting for the reality of our time, the design implores us to acknowledge how emerging technology, the rise of global information, and the classic maritime system are interlinked. It recognizes that shipping traffic over traditional sea lanes is increasing, new trade routes are opening in the Arctic, and new technologies are making undersea resources more accessible. An important line of effort in fulfilling our design is to expand and strengthen the Navy's network of partners, and clearly the Arctic is an area of cooperation and partnership. The region has been conflict-free, largely due to the extraordinary efforts of intergovernmental fora, such as the very important Arctic Council, and as the Commandant of the Coast Guard no doubt mentioned, the Arctic Coast Guard Forum. The Arctic Council is committed to promoting cooperation and interaction among the 8 Arctic countries, 6 Arctic indigenous peoples organizations, 13 non-Arctic countries, 13 intergovernmental organizations, and 13 non-governmental organizations that have an interest in the Arctic, all of which are committed to sustainable development and responsible environmental and social assessments in the region. So in keeping with the design and its themes that call for a deepening of operational relationships with other services, agencies, allies, and partners, U.S. Navy forces operating in the Arctic are likely to provide a supporting role to the Coast Guard for search and rescue operations, and to support interagency and international partners, if needed, for civil activities. But be assured that the Navy is and will remain focused on its primary mission to be prepared to prevent conflict and to ensure that our national interests are protected. The U.S. Navy has been in the Arctic for quite a while. For example, the world's first successful submarine transit of the geographic North Pole was conducted by USS Nautilus in 1958, heralding the start of a successful extended Arctic undersea exploration and operation. Since then, the U.S. Navy regularly and routinely operates and conducts undersea exercises in the Arctic Ocean, and collaborates and cooperates with other Arctic nations by participating in multinational exercises, including an ICEX held every 2 years. Through its Arctic presence, the Navy's submarine force continues to contribute to our homeland defense. Although we patrol the Arctic with our undersea and air assets, the Arctic is expected to remain a low-threat security environment. It is encouraging that nations have demonstrated a sincere desire to leverage existing frameworks of cooperation to resolve disputes peacefully. Moreover, most nations are committed to the legal architecture set forth by the provisions of the United States Convention on Law of the Sea to peacefully resolve differences. Our design nests under the national strategy for the Arctic region that defines the desired end state as an Arctic region stable and free of conflict, where nations act responsibly in a spirit of trust and cooperation, and where economic and energy resources are developed in a sustainable manner. Shortly after this national strategy for the Arctic was released, the Department of Defense released its 2013 Arctic strategy that identified its objectives to ensure security, support safety, and promote defense cooperation, and to prepare for a wide range of challenges and contingencies. The strategy was updated in 2016 to sharpen its focus on homeland defense in light of changes to the international security environment. To supplement the national level guidance, the Navy released its own Arctic document that many of you are familiar with that we call the Arctic Roadmap. Signed by the CNO, the Arctic Roadmap identifies 4 strategic objectives. First, ensuring sovereignty of the United States Arctic region. Second, providing ready naval forces to respond to crises and contingencies. Third, preserving freedom of navigation. And finally, promoting partnerships within the U.S. government and with its international allies and partners. In addition to identifying strategic objectives, the Navy has been following a measured plan designed to improve our future capacity to conduct operations and training, to seek opportunities in science and technology, to make better use of facilities and equipment, to enhance maritime domain awareness, and to advance environmental observation and prediction. The Arctic Roadmap enhances the line of effort in our design to deepen the dialogue with research and development labs and academia. And tomorrow, Commander Kelly Taylor will speak to you more extensively about the Navy's Arctic Roadmap. As we execute our Maritime Arctic strategy, we are determined to ensure focus on a particular objective: our national security interest in preserving the freedoms of navigation and overflight and other lawful uses of the sea and the Arctic. The Navy will be consistent in its global approach to maintaining peace and stability and promoting respect for international law. To support freedom of navigation, we have several options in the Arctic. Navy submarines can and do conduct freedom of navigation operations either undersea or on the surface. Navy aircraft can and do conduct operations throughout the year, and Navy ships can conduct operations in open water during the summer melt season. Most importantly, we support the National Fleet Plan, where U.S. Coast Guard cutters, as sovereign immune vessels, can challenge excessive claims through freedom of navigation operations. Moreover, because freedom of navigation operations support international law, they can be conducted by any allied navy, as is currently being done in the South China Sea. Strategic international partnerships are the key to ensuring a peaceful Arctic. In accordance with our design, we are engaged in extensive security cooperation activities and other military-to-military forms of engagement to establish and maintain international relations and partnerships necessary to meet security challenges and reduce the potential for friction. We also are able to achieve our National Maritime Arctic Strategy by working in close collaboration with the U.S. Coast Guard to address gaps in Arctic communications, maritime domain awareness, search and rescue, and environmental observation and forecasting capabilities in support of both current and future planning and operations. The Navy and the Coast Guard collaborate and complement each other's unique capabilities and authorities. Specifically, the Coast Guard concentrates on safety and security, addressing such missions as Arctic fisheries protection, search and rescue, and environmental protection, while the Navy concentrates, of course, on defense missions. Because of our deliberate and extensive planning and interoperability, both services seamlessly support one another. Central to our design for maintaining maritime superiority, the U.S. Navy also works closely with our geographic combatant commands. Within their geographic area of responsibility, the U.S. European Command and U.S. Pacific Command are fostering collaborative working relationships with regional partners. And the U.S. Northern Command, which has responsibility for the Arctic and Alaska, is the U.S. Department of Defense advocate for Arctic capabilities. The Northern Command recently updated its plans for the Arctic and analyzed future capability requirements for this challenging and evolving region. We continue to train and operate routinely in the region as we monitor the changing environment, revisiting assessments and taking actions as conditions change. Our design encourages us to be receptive to innovation and creativity and to the lessons of history. And it well may be possible that the process by which non-military Arctic issues are being successfully resolved has the potential to serve as a model to resolve future issues of national security among the countries that have an interest in Arctic maritime stability. In the meantime, we believe that a near-term conflict over Arctic resources is unlikely, given the level of cooperation and adherence to international legal norms observed and practiced by Arctic and non-Arctic nations. For now, the Navy's security posture remains appropriate for the Arctic. We have significant undersea capabilities and deep operational experience with our submarine force that routinely operates in the Arctic Ocean under the ice. The Navy recognizes the strategic importance of the Arctic region, the national security implications of the diminishing sea ice of the Arctic Ocean, and the importance of free and unfettered navigation in this ocean. The Navy also recognizes that an ice-diminished Arctic remains a very difficult maritime operating environment. The climate is harsh, the distances are vast, the infrastructure is limited, darkness dominates the winter months. As sea ice diminishes and the Arctic Ocean opens to more maritime activity, the U.S. Navy may be called upon more frequently to support other federal agencies as we continue to work with our international partners to ensure a secure, stable, and most importantly, peaceful region. There are challenges ahead, but through our design and its principles of partnerships, learning, strength, and teamwork, the U.S. Navy will remain vital to the stability of the Arctic region. And with that, Pablo, I'm happy to take any questions with my remaining time.
Thank you, Admiral. In case none of you have any questions, we have some online, but I'll open it up to you guys. Any questions from the audience on Navy engagement in the Arctic? Those lights are so bright, and you're right in front. There you go.
Yeah, the Navy, of course, acquires navigation data wherever we go. And as a matter of routine, that's provided to NGS within the Department of Defense. And then it would be further shared from there. You're going to hear later on from Admiral Dave Hahn, who commands our Office of Naval Research. And he also has some additional projects that he's working on using unmanned vehicles to do additional charting of those waters. Like all things, we're limited in resources, so we have to prioritize. So As the Arctic becomes increasingly navigable, I'd expect that we'll see additional work in that area.
I'm going to take one online.
Sure.
Is the Navy planning to make investments for ice-capable surface vessels anytime in the near future?
Well, with my last sentence, we're limited in resources, so we have to prioritize. So we feel under current conditions that our undersea capability from the submarine force and the fact that all our aircraft can operate throughout the Arctic region provides us with the capability that we need there. We have looked at what would be necessary for surface ships. It's pretty extensive changes to the hull to be ice hardened, and it is quite expensive when it add a lot to the cost of our ships. Given that we're trying to expand the fleet size, we have a greater priority on that right now than ice hardening our surface ships. Yeah, the ICEX is done every 2 years for those not familiar with that. And we will send at least one and often multiple submarines to the Arctic for those operations. And in the past, we have included other countries with their naval assets. It provides a base camp as well that allows scientists to conduct research while they're there, as well as dignitaries to pay a visit and become more informed through firsthand experience in the Arctic. It is structured in the sense that we have to program for it with funding, and therefore we do it every 2 years. And then to make the most of the opportunity, again, what we do there is fairly well planned out in advance and structured to make sure that we get the largest return on our investment. Is there something beyond that that you were? Mm-hmm. Oh, sure, yeah. That's also tagged with geolocation data, I believe. And so we're careful to protect some of our operations while we're there, and so not all of it can be releasable. But we do try to provide as much as we can, again, to get the most return on the investment for the operations there.
In 1940s, you had
Well, again, most of what we do is through the Navy Arctic Submarine Lab, which is headquartered in San Diego. And that's the command that runs these biannual ICEXs. And that will be the main thrust of our effort in the near term. Again, we'll assess conditions as we go forward and evolve the Navy's posture there as appropriate. If there becomes more commercial activity, I'd expect there'd be more U.S. government agency activity and then a greater need for support from the Navy in the future.
One more online. You don't have to answer it, but I'll ask it. You state that the Arctic is expected to remain a low-threat security environment. What is your definition or scope of security?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to answer.
Well, Pablo, I'm wondering why you're so forgiving with me, but we're so harsh with the Commandant of the Coast Guard there. Security in the sense of military security and what I was referring to. Obviously, other forms of security, personal security, with the harsh conditions operating there, is more a function of the Coast Guard. The Navy is defense and national security. And this would refer to military activity in the Arctic. And again, so far the nations are cooperating and communicating, and we're not sensing a threat developing in that area.
With this speaker, we have plenty of time. If there are no more questions from the audience, we really would like to thank you for representing.
Yep, certainly.